Good day. I submitted an abstract for this paper, I think about a year and a half ago, and as you all know, we were supposed to be giving these talks March a year ago instead of this March, but better late than never, I suppose. If there's any benefit to this, it's that we've had another year of experience, so we can kind of maybe fill out some of these stories a little bit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about operational experience we've had with the new herbicide Procellaor against Eurasian milfoil in the Pacific Northwest. It's not too often you get a new tool in the toolbox, and this is one we've got to work with a little bit, and we're pretty encouraged with what we've seen so far. Eurasian milfoil is probably the dominant invasive aquatic weed we face. This is kind of the footprint of our company. I've got offices from the Southern California area up to the Canadian border, and every one of those offices deals with Eurasian milfoil on a significant basis, even the Southern California ones. It's one of the major invasive aquatic weeds in some of the reservoirs and lakes around the area down there. But up in the Pacific Northwest, milfoil has been around for decades and is widely distributed and is really seen as a major problem. So, Eurasian milfoil, as I'm sure you all know, is an invasive aquatic plant. It's got a number of impacts it has on water use nationally. It impacts the beneficial uses that lake users may have. It impacts swimming. There's usually a number of drowning deaths every year directly attributed to people being tangled up in milfoil beds. It also has environmental impacts. It changes water chemistry to some degree, and impacts boating, hydropower operations, things like that. One of the unique things to the Pacific Northwest, though, is all of the rivers and lakes all of the rivers and most of the lakes are kind of a highway for salmon. Salmon spend the bulk of their life in the Pacific Ocean, but they're born up way up these rivers and lakes. They swim, migrate to the sea. They spend some time at the ocean, and they have to find their way back to where they came from to reproduce and start the process all over again. And Eurasian milfoil has had a real dramatic impact on these types of things. Salmon need cold water and high dissolved oxygen levels. Eurasian milfoil infestations in these rivers and lakes does a lot of significantly impacts them. It reduces the dissolved oxygen available. It dramatically warms up the water inside the milfoil beds, which concentrates the salmon in deeper water on the edges of these things as they migrate, which makes them more susceptible to predation. So that's one additional reason we want to go after it and target it in the Pacific Northwest. We've had control options for a number of years that are used in various types of operations. Contact herbicides provide short-term relief. We can clean up beaches, that type of thing, but there's no long-term benefit. We have had two really good systemic herbicides for Eurasian milfoil that are selective for Eurasian milfoil. That would be 2,4-D and triclopyr. And triclopyr is the more recent one. We are starting to see, though, that there's hybrid plants, crosses between the northern milfoil and the Eurasian milfoil in some parts of the Pacific Northwest. And we've also noticed that 2,4-D is starting to lose efficacy on some of these strains or hybrid strains. Lastly, we have used sonar or fluoridone a number of times in smaller lake systems to eradicate Eurasian milfoil, but that process has such a long contact exposure time requirement. The herbicide has to be around the plants for 6 to 8 weeks that it really only works well in a situation where you can do a whole lake treatment. But where you can do that, that's been a real effective tool for us. So on to Procellaor. One of the things our company's been blessed with is we've had an opportunity for about 3 decades to work for and with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Aquatic Plant Control Research Program. They brought us on back in the early 80s to help them map the Sacramento River Delta hyacinth problem before that got turned over to the state. We did quite a bit of work on the Potomac River Forum when hydrilla came into there. But since about 1988 or so, we've worked throughout the Pacific Northwest almost every year, helping them with studies where they're scaling up laboratory and mesocosm technologies with different herbicides to field level, and that's been a real benefit to us. Triclopyr is a good example of that. We got to do a number of triclopyr applications, large-scale triclopyr applications, and monitor them long before it was registered and available for operational use. So we already had a pretty good idea of what it did and didn't do. So that's just a little background there. As a consequence of this relationship, we knew that the Corps was working with Procellaor and was really positive about it. These are some mesocosm studies they were doing prior to it being registered and available for use operationally. This is their facility in Louisville. This particular study, they looked at two things that were really interesting to us. One is the Eurasian milfoil was one of the target plants, but they also picked up and used some of the hybrid from Hayden Lake, Idaho, which is known to be a highly tolerant strain of milfoil. And then they put a number of other native species in there to try to get a handle on impacts they might have on some of these off-target species. So that research has been presented a number of times. Just a quick update. This is a picture of one of the mesocosms where you see untreated native plants plus the two milfoil strains that you see on the left-hand side there. 2 weeks or 2 months post-treatment at pretty low rate. And you can kind of see that totally removed the Eurasian milfoil and the hybrid milfoil had no impact on the natives whatsoever, which is kind of what we expected. So that brings us to about 2008. The EPA provided registration for the new herbicide Procellaor in February of 2018. And that's when we were able to get our hands on it and take it into the field in some of the areas we work in. Washington State had to add it to their NPDES permit, and that process took another year. So we weren't able to use it inside Washington State until 2019. But just a couple of highlights about the product. One of the key things is it's got a real short contact exposure time requirement. Another kind of key thing was it was registered as a reduced risk classification product, which means that it's meant to kind of replace some of the older technologies and has an excellent environmental profile. This can be used in potable water reservoirs with no restrictions. The only real restriction are some moderate or easy to deal with restrictions on taking water from the treatment areas for irrigation use. The key thing that I think is really important about this is it gets into the plants extremely fast, which makes it available for use in areas where a product with a longer contact exposure time might not work very well. Flowing water, steep shorelines, thick places like that. The plant concentration factor of this herbicide is kind of a measure of how fast it gets out of the water and into the plant, which is where you want it. And you can kind of see if you compare it to some of the other herbicides we use that it's dramatically faster than a lot of the things that would maybe also be used to target Eurasian milfoil. So that's a couple of key factors of why we use it. So I want to talk about a number of different projects here and just kind of give you an overview of our field experiences with it and what we found and what we think of those products and projects and what the results were. So Morton Slough, Loon Lake is kind of a hybrid. There's a run-of-the-river reservoir in Montana called Noxon Reservoir we'll talk about. And then the lakes, American Lake, Hayden, Coquilala, Vancouver Lake are more normal lake type applications. So the Morton Slough was the first time we really got a chance to operationally put this stuff in the water. This was done in 2018. It was a combined, we were the applicator that did the work as part of this study. It was a kind of a study to get some additional data on dissipation and things like that. And that's what you see the sampling points are there. But we treated this grid in August, and then it was evaluated a couple of times by the rest of the team. This is one of Kurt Getzinger's projects. You can kind of see the usual cast of characters that he brings along to these things. And they went back and looked at it 6 weeks post-treatment and 1 year post-treatment. And the results inside that plot in terms of targeting the milfoils that were present were excellent both times. There's a lot of fires in the area that year. That's kind of why you see the haze and the smoke in the background, but it's just an interesting project to work on. Loon Lake is another site that we were able to use Procellaor on. This is a project we started working on in 2016 after another applicator had worked there for a number of years. We'd worked there previously. We were brought back in 2016 to implement a proposal we had given them a couple of years earlier to use triclopyr and 2,4-D to target the milfoil present in the lake, assuming it was Eurasian milfoil. And we made our applications. We didn't see the plants responding like they normally would. So we kind of came back and, what's going on here? And we took 10 samples from different places around the lake. We submitted them for DNA analysis, and all 10 of them came back as hybrid strains. So we then were able to move forward with that thought in mind and do some work. So Loon Lake has a lake management district. Our state's got a mechanism in place where they can set up a taxing district to do lake restoration and aquatic plant management activities. The board, we also have in Washington State a freshwater aquatic weed fund that you can apply for grants for. So we put a proposal together and submitted it to Department of Ecology with the LMD or through the LMD. And the idea was to develop technologies to come in and manage hybrid milfoils in Washington State. And this was a demonstration project. The first thing we did was we went through these steps here. We mapped the infestation, collected plants for the target areas. We hired North Carolina State University to do concentration exposure time experiments on the populations from this lake with 2 of the herbicides we thought would be appropriate for use based on the conditions in the lake, and those were triclopyr and which renovate and Procellaor. And then we used that data to kind of go operationally. I'll show you some slides in a minute. We also kind of put together a manual and procedure for targeting hybrid populations in the Northwest. And we kind of really found that this concentration exposure time against the plants from that lake really give you a good idea of what you could do to get some good results in the field. Just a couple shots of the NC State work. We submitted plants to them. They grew them out in the greenhouse over about 6 months. They planted them in their mesocosm facilities here, that you see on the left-hand side of the screen, exposed them to different concentrations and different lengths of time with the 2 herbicides we're interested in looking at. Results basically were that they found that everything they tried worked extremely well. We took this data and kind of went to the field. We did publish a poster. It was presented at the Aquatic Plant Management Society meeting back in July of 2019, which I guess is the last meeting most of us ever went to. But anyhow, that's available if anybody's interested in looking at it. So in July 5th of 2019, the permit finally became active in Washington State where we could use Procellaor. Was added to the permit. So we took the NC State data. We looked at, we put maps together based on the size of the area and the rapid or the depth of the drop off offshore. We came up with a couple different rates of prescription dose units to apply to these areas. Based on the work we did, we made the application to 75 acres. Application basically looked like this. The deeper water areas, we used drop hoses to inject the stuff. Procellaor you want it in the upper part of the water column or near the apical growing tips because that's one of the primary uptake sites. We also used another treatment vessel to kind of work in and around boat slips in places where the boom couldn't get. That's what you see on the other side there. So we set up a number of pre and post treatment point intercept points and on different locations in the lake. We had excellent results, we thought, in terms of 6-week post-treatment control. 1 year post-treatment, we had really excellent results too. We did have one little spot right down kind of in this area where the plants came back to some degree. We took those and looked at them again and dosed them the following year a little bit higher and took care of that problem in 2020. But overall, we got just excellent control going through that process. American Lake is over on the west side of the state. It's Mount Rainier in the background. It's about a 1,200 acre lake. It's got a real popular kokanee fishery, drops off pretty quick. Generally has consolidated gravel bottom for the most part. It was, we don't know when milfoil was introduced, but by 2017, it ringed most of the littoral area and was really just a massive problem for the people. So they got a planning grant from the Department of Ecology. We helped them do some mapping. The city of Lakewood, with their stakeholder group, put together an integrated aquatic vegetation management plan. The recommended option from that was to use Procellaor. So in August of 2019, we treated 666 acres with Procellaor. This is kind of a map of the lake. We treated pretty much the entire littoral zone of the lake with a few exceptions. We did have to leave an area around the potable, or excuse me, the irrigation intake for the Tacoma Golf and Country Club. You see up in the left, I guess the right-hand corner. We came back as soon as the irrigation season was over and touched up the milfoil that was present there. But the year of treatment, we had excellent control. We went from very dense, growth down to 6 weeks post-treatment, not seeing any plants really at all. A few stragglers that looked sick and looked like they were going to go down. We also did 3 extensive surveys during the summer of 2002. This is just one shot of the pre-treatment on the left side of the milfoil, typical milfoil infestation in the lake. You can see 1 year post-treatment on the other side of the screen here. You're looking at the gravel bottom, no milfoil, no plants, no invasive milfoil in sight, and a few small spots around the lake that maybe 1/10 of an acre in size or so, where we had a few stragglers, but we touched those up in the summer of 2002, and we plan to keep moving forward under contract to survey and target anything that pops up in the next couple of years. So that was extremely successful. People are very happy. Noxon Reservoir is a run-of-the-river reservoir. It's got a number of dams on it that Avista Power owns. Water is pretty much running all the time through here, so it's not like a bigger reservoir that kind of pools up. There usually is, pretty swift-moving, kind of currents kind of coming through this thing. So Noxon Reservoir is downstream from Lake Pend Oreille. It eventually goes through Lake Pend Oreille, the Pend Oreille River, and into the Columbia River, and it's had a real problematic milfoil infestation for about a decade. They've been working on it. They've used a number of other technologies like 2,4-D and Aquathol, and have had good results some years and mixed results other years, and wanted to look at triclopyr. So we put together a treatment program. We treated this block right here that you can kind of see, and we treated another one down or upstream from here along the shoreline that was about a 10-acre plot, and made those applications. The Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks had done a pre-treatment survey of these plots. They recorded the presence of milfoil. They also did post-treatment stuff at both about 6 months or 2 months post-treatment, and they did another survey about 1 year post-treatment. You can kind of see from this, they just got excellent results in terms of looking at this particular plot. 93% reduction. The stuff that was remaining there was severe herbicide injury. Just a quick shot of the species, the mix of species present. As you can see, there's a significant reduction on Eurasian milfoil and no real impact on the other species that were present, which you'd expect with an auxin-based herbicide. 1 year post-treatment, this is the comments that the Department of Fish and Wildlife, their survey team, looked at. They found that milfoil had been significantly reduced in both plots. They found 0 milfoil in the large plot and a few plants in the upstream 10-acre plot. But again, the results we thought to be were, excellent, highly successful. Hayden Lake and Coquilala Lake are 2 lakes in North Idaho, just north of Coeur d'Alene. We treated these under contract with the Idaho Department of Agriculture in summer of 2019. So Hayden Lake's a large lake, 6,800 acres. We treated 93 acres at the direction of the Department of Agriculture staff. They came up with these treatment polygons and application rates. We made the application. You can see that some of these polygons are in kind of deep bays. The rest of them are steep shorelines. We made the application. And the ISDA evaluated these sites in the summer of 2000, so 1 year post-treatment, basically. Their comments, you can see here, were that the survey points they had, they basically found no presence of milfoil at the survey points 1 year post-treatment anywhere in these 93 acres. That was considered to be a success. Coquilala Lake is just north of there. Another ISDA project, 700-acre lake near Sandpoint. We treated 50 acres with Procellaor in the summer of 2019 at these locations, and then ISDA came back. Their comments from the 2002 evaluation are basically the same. All the survey points they took throughout the lake, including points outside the treatment areas, they basically found that the milfoil had been cleared out of the system. So no need to do any treatment there in 2020, which was a big benefit for them. Like the last lake we probably want to talk a little bit about is Vancouver Lake. This is a 27-acre lake. It's connected to the Columbia River through what's called a flushing channel, and it's also connected through a thing called a long um, corridor of water called Lake River. It's not really a river, but it's a connection to the lake that's about 9 miles long, or to the river that's about 9 miles long. There is a tidal influence. It's upstream from the Pacific Ocean on the Columbia. There's a bit of a tidal influence that goes on here. They discovered that a really heavy Eurasian milfoil problem, and they saw it expanding maybe 3 to 4 years ago. And one of the things was impacting was they have a number of regattas here that generate about $2 million for the local economy, with all the people that attend regionally and nationally to work on the rowing facility. You can kind of see here on the right-hand slide. So the milfoil was expanding dramatically. By the summer of 2019. They had approximately 600 acres. There was one issue that popped up that kind of prevented us from doing the treatment in 2019. What you're seeing here, the blue area is the treatment area we came up with. The red dots are the survey, or the point intercept survey results from 2019 that the Department of Fish and Wildlife took. You kind of see dense populations of milfoil. By 2020. It expanded to 700 acres. So we mobilized 3 application boats, treated 700 acres, also treated the flushing channel, which you kind of see is right here. This is the Columbia River down here. It took us about 1.5 days to get all those acres treated. And we looked at it 6 months we looked at it 6 weeks post-treatment. We saw excellent results. The Department of Fish and Wildlife came back to these sites and repeated their point intercept survey and did not find milfoil at any single one of the 400 to 500 points that they sampled. So another kind of situation where we got excellent results and really saw some good things. 2 of these projects, CPRO just recently launched a program where they're going out and doing some of the stories of the success. So if you can go on the website at these links and kind of look at those if you have any interest. And then in summary, and I'll be done, we just think that this is, from what we've seen, it's an excellent tool to selectively control Eurasian milfoil. It also gives us a tool to target hybrid milfoils where they're present. With the fast accumulation time, we can find that we can do work in areas with higher water exchange and be pretty confident what it's going to do. The last one you see here is really critical to our guys, though. It's very small containers replace thousands of pounds of, something like a triclopyr granular herbicide. So it's a lot easier to get out and use in the field, as well as being kind of an excellent tool. So we see a lot of promise, and we expect to be using this going forward for quite a while. So thank you for your attention. We'll stop here.